In a distant corner of the galaxy, a small human colony stood on a barren planet, untouched by the conflicts of the wider universe. Life on the colony was peaceful. People lived simple, honest lives, working together to make a home on a harsh world. They weren't part of any big alliances or wars, just humans, living quietly and minding their own business. But that peace was about to be shattered in the most unimaginable way. One day, a fleet of alien ships appeared in the skies, blocking out the stars. The inhabitants of the colony had never seen anything like it. The ships were massive, sleek, and powerful, easily capable of wiping out everything in their path. Their invaders, a race known as the Exarthians, were known throughout the galaxy for their speed, intelligence, and brutal military tactics. The Exarthians had conquered planets before, and they didn't care much for what was left behind. Their reputation was enough to make any race quake in fear. As the colony watched in horror, the first wave of the Exarthian soldiers descended onto the surface. They moved swiftly, as though they knew exactly what they were doing. Armed with technology light years ahead of anything the humans had, they slaughtered anyone who tried to resist. Panic spread like wildfire as the colony's leaders scrambled to come up with a plan, but there was no hope. The humans were no match for the Arthians, and everyone knew it. Even the bravest souls were beginning to lose faith. Among the colony's inhabitants was a man named Marcus. He had been a soldier once, in a time long before this peaceful life. His past was full of battles, blood, and destruction, things he'd left behind when he decided to retire and raise a family. Marcus had thought he was done with war, but now, as the alien ships loomed overhead, he couldn't escape his past. He knew that if the humans had any chance at survival, he was the one who would have to lead them. First, no one believed it. Marcus was older now, his hair graying and his body slower than it had been in his prime. Most of the colony thought of him as a relic of an old, forgotten war. They were wrong. As Marcus looked out across the burning landscape, he felt the fire of the old soldier rise within him. He knew the Exarthians didn't see him as a threat. To them, he was just another aging human, helpless in the face of their superior power. They had no idea what they were up against. The first step was simple: survive. The Exarthians had already taken control of most of the colony, but there were still pockets of resistance scattered around the planet. Marcus knew he had to find them, and fast. He gathered a small group of survivors, farmers, traders, and even a few former soldiers who had put down their weapons long ago. Together, they made their way through the dense forests and underground tunnels, hiding from the enemy. The Exarthians had underestimated the humans. They had no idea that humans, when pushed into a corner, would fight not just with their weapons, but with their minds. Marcus was no longer just a soldier. He was a strategist, a leader, a man who understood how to fight a war not just with strength, but with the element of surprise. Over the next few days, Marcus and his team began launching small attacks on the Exarthian forces. At first, the aliens were amused. A few humans with outdated guns and primitive traps couldn't possibly threaten them. But as the days passed, the Exarthians started to notice something strange. The humans didn't fight like any other species they had encountered. They didn't follow the rules. They didn't wait for the right moment. They attacked when they shouldn't have, and they retreated when they shouldn't have. They made no sense, but that was exactly what made them so dangerous. One night, Marcus and his group managed to infiltrate one of the Exarthian command centers, using their knowledge of the terrain and the element of surprise. They disabled the aliens' communication network, cutting off their ability to coordinate attacks. The Exarthians were furious, but the humans were already gone, leaving behind nothing but confusion and chaos. The more they fought, the more the Exarthians began to question their assumptions about humanity. They had believed that humans were weak, primitive creatures who couldn't stand up to them. But the humans were proving them wrong at every turn. Each battle was a struggle, each victory hard-earned, but with each success, Marcus and his group grew bolder. They weren't just defending their colony anymore. They were fighting for something more. They were fighting to prove that humanity, despite its small size and the vastness of space, was not to be underestimated. Days turned into weeks, and the tide began to shift. The Exarthians, once so confident in their superiority, now found themselves on the back foot. They began to grow frustrated, sending in more forces, but the humans were ready. Every move they made was calculated. Every trap they set was meant to confuse and disorient their enemies. The Exarthians were starting to see what the humans had known all along. You couldn't break a species that refused to stay down. In the final confrontation, Marcus stood face to face with the Exarthian general. The alien was massive, towering over him, but Marcus wasn't afraid. He had fought too long and too hard to let fear control him now. The general, sensing Marcus's resolve, sneered at him, thinking the human had no chance. But in that moment, Marcus knew something the general didn't. Sometimes, the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy isn't a gun or a spaceship. It's the will to fight when everyone else has given up. With one final strike, Marcus brought the alien general to his knees. The remaining Xarthian forces, demoralized and broken, began to retreat, leaving the humans victorious. The galaxy would never again underestimate humanity. They had seen the might of the Exarthians fall before the human spirit. And as Marcus stood on the battlefield, bloodied but not broken, he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just the victory of a few brave souls. This was the victory of all humanity. And the universe would never forget in a forgotten corner of the galaxy. The human race had long been dismissed as weak and insignificant. The galaxy's more powerful alien races ruled with fear, their technology far beyond anything humanity could imagine. Most believed that humans were simply too small and too primitive to ever pose a threat. But they were wrong. Deep within the heart of the human colony on a remote planet, something ancient and powerful was hidden, buried for centuries. The humans didn't know it yet, but their very survival depended on what lay beneath the surface of their home. It all began when a strange signal was detected. At first, it seemed like a simple blip, a small anomaly in the galaxy's vast expanse. But to a curious scientist named Dr. Elena Graves, the signal was more than that. Elena had spent years studying ancient human texts, tracing forgotten legends of powerful technologies that were said to have been lost in the chaos of past wars. She always thought they were just stories until now. The signal led Elena to an abandoned underground facility hidden beneath the surface of the planet. The air was thick with dust, and the walls whispered of a time long gone. Elena wasn't sure what she was looking for, but she knew this was important. As she made her way through the facility's dark halls, her heart raced with both excitement and fear. What could this place be? And why had it been forgotten for so long? The facility was ancient, older than anything Elena had ever seen. It was clear that it had once belonged to humanity, but from a time so far in the past, the technology here seemed almost magical. There were machines, devices, and weapons that seemed far beyond anything human hands could create. Yet there it was, hidden in plain sight, waiting to be discovered. Elena soon uncovered a strange object, a crystal-like artifact that pulsed with an eerie light. She couldn't explain what it was, but somehow, she knew this was the key to something much bigger than herself. The moment she touched the crystal, the ground beneath her feet shook and a low hum filled the air. Something inside her mind clicked. She saw flashes of images, words and symbols, a language she couldn't understand but somehow felt she could. This was it. This was the ancient secret. But Elena wasn't the only one who had noticed the signal. Far away, in the heart of the galaxy, the Exarthians, the same alien race that had conquered countless worlds, had intercepted the signal too. They were quick to recognize the significance of what it could mean. If humans had rediscovered this long-lost technology, the balance of power in the galaxy could shift forever. The Exarthians were ruthless, their empire vast and unforgiving. They had already wiped out entire civilizations in their quest for dominance. They had no intention of letting humans, of all species, stand in their way. They set their sights on the remote planet, ready to take whatever they needed by force. As the first wave of Xarthian ships arrived, the humans were caught off guard. Their planet was peaceful, too peaceful. They weren't ready for a fight. Elena, now aware of the powerful secret she had uncovered, knew she had to act quickly. She contacted the leaders of the colony, warning them of the impending invasion. But the problem was bigger than just fighting off an attack. The Exarthians weren't just here for the planet. They were here for the secret. Borders of political alliances, But they were more interested in taking what they wanted from the humans, exploiting their resources and technology. Jared listened intently, his calm demeanor hiding the storm of thoughts racing through his mind. He knew these aliens, their patterns, their tactics. He'd studied their cultures, their leaders, and their weaknesses. And he knew one thing above all else: these creatures, no matter how powerful they seemed, were not prepared for the unpredictability of human thought. One of the council members, an imposing figure from the Exilorian Empire, stood up and made a harsh demand. "The human colonies will surrender their defenses," the Exilorian said. "Your world will be governed by the will of the Galactic Empire, effective immediately. There will be no negotiations." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Jared, who remained calm, unmoved by the harsh words. "Tell me, Exilorian," Jared said, his voice cool, "have you ever played chess?" The Exilorian's eyes narrowed, confused. "What does that have to do with this matter?" Jared smiled, leaning forward slightly. "You see, the game of chess is all about controlling the board. You position your pieces, make sacrifices, and force your opponent to act according to your plan. But the best players know one thing: it's not just about the pieces you move. It's about the moves your opponent doesn't expect. It's about making them believe they're in control while you set up the perfect trap." The council room buzzed with murmurs. The Exilorian was clearly unsettled, but he masked it with a sneer. "Are you trying to threaten me with a game?" Jared's eyes locked with the Exilorian's, and for a brief moment, the room felt colder. "No," Jared said slowly. "I'm just reminding you that not everything is as simple as it seems. You think you can bully humanity into submission, but you haven't even begun to understand us." The tension in the room was palpable. The Exilorian's posture stiffened, clearly frustrated by Jared's cryptic words. But Jared had already begun his game. The aliens in the room were smart. They were all calculating, looking for weaknesses, trying to anticipate the next move. They expected Jared to back down, to concede. But instead, he was playing the long game. He was planting seeds of doubt, nudging the council members toward uncertainty. He didn't need to argue with them. He needed them to argue with each other. As the meeting continued, Jared continued to speak in calm, measured tones. But his words weren't just about negotiation. He was subtly planting ideas in the minds of the council members, making them question each other's motives, their plans. He spoke of the fragility of their alliances, of the cracks in their unity, of the long-standing rivalries between species that had always simmered beneath the surface. Jared was a master at reading people, at understanding their fears and desires. He knew what buttons to push, what words to say, to make them doubt themselves. And slowly, the aliens began to react. The Exilorian representative grew defensive, the Zarkani diplomat seemed irritated, and the leader of the Rothian delegation, known for his calm demeanor, began to fidget nervously. By the time the meeting reached its climax, Jared had completely changed the atmosphere. What had started as a simple negotiation had turned into a battle of wills. The once confident aliens were now second-guessing each other. The Galactic Council, which had once seemed unshakable, was now in chaos. But Jared wasn't done yet. As the council members began to argue among themselves, Jared seized the opportunity. He turned to the chair of the council, an ancient being from the planet Elifu who had watched over the council for centuries. The Eliothian leader, a wise and calculating entity, had remained silent throughout most of the meeting. But now, Jared locked eyes with him. "Perhaps," Jared said softly, "it's time we reconsider how we approach the balance of power. Perhaps we shouldn't just look at humans as a simple resource. Maybe we should start looking at humans as equals." The Eliothian leader regarded Jared for a long moment. Then, to everyone's shock, he nodded slowly. "Perhaps it is time." The room fell silent. The Exilorians, the Zarkani, and the Rothians all looked at each other, uncertain of what had just happened. Jared had played them perfectly. He hadn't needed to raise his voice or threaten them. He had simply planted the seeds of doubt and watched as they unraveled. By the time the meeting ended, the humans had secured what they had come for: an agreement that would ensure the survival of their colonies and a seat at the table of the Galactic Council. The alien empires, once so sure of their superiority, were now forced to treat humans with a level of respect they had never given them before. As Jard left the council chambers, a small smile played at the corners of his lips. He had done it. The humans had proven once again that they were not to be underestimated, not through strength or firepower, but through cunning and strategy. The universe would never forget the day the humans played the greatest mind game of all. The sky burned a deep crimson as the enemy fleet descended from the stars, darkening the horizon. For the people of Earth, the situation was clear. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and on the verge of extinction. The Zokari Empire, a ruthless alien force that had crushed civilizations for centuries, had set their sights on Earth. They were coming with everything they had, and humanity's defenses, though brave, were nowhere near enough to withstand their assault. Captain Kara Lawson stood on the bridge of the defiant humanity's last warship. Her hands gripped the cold steel of the console, her eyes scanning the view screen that displayed the enemy fleet. Thousands of ships, each one larger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever built, filled the space ahead. The odds were hopeless. The battle would be brutal, and the outcome seemed inevitable. "We're ready, Captain," her first officer, Lieutenant Harris, said, his voice tight with tension. He had been by her side for years, through countless skirmishes and near defeats. But even he couldn't hide the fear in his eyes. Kara took a deep breath and turned to face him. "We're not giving up. We're fighting to the end. The people on Earth are counting on us." The crew of the Defiant was small, only a handful of soldiers and engineers, but they were determined. Each one had chosen to fight for their home, knowing they were facing overwhelming odds. Kara had made peace with the fact that they might not survive. But she wasn't about to surrender without a fight. The first wave of Zokari fighters came in fast, their sleek ships cutting through space like predatory birds. Kara's hands moved swiftly across the console, giving orders as she activated the ship's weapons. The Defiant fired its plasma cannons, striking down several of the smaller Zokari vessels, but the enemy was relentless. "We're taking fire," Lieutenant Harris shouted. "Shields are down to 40%. "Brace for impact," Kara ordered. The Defiant rocked violently as enemy fire hit their shields. Sparks flew across the bridge, and alarms blared. The crew held on as the ship took more hits. The Zokari were overwhelming them with sheer numbers, and Kara knew it was only a matter of time before they were completely overwhelmed. "We need a miracle," Kara muttered under her breath. But as the Zokari forces closed in, something unexpected happened. The Defiant's radar picked up an anomaly, another fleet, a fleet of human ships, appearing out of nowhere, emerging from a nearby nebula. Kara's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea where these ships had come from, but one thing was clear: they were here to fight. "Who are they?" Lieutenant Harris asked, astonished. Kara was equally baffled. She had heard rumors of a secret human fleet built in the shadows, but she hadn't believed them. Now, here they were, charging into battle alongside the Defiant, ready to take on the Zokari. It was a long shot, but it was a chance. The new fleet moved with precision, coordinating with the Defiant in perfect harmony. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting with purpose. Each ship moved with the speed and agility of a predator, weaving through enemy fire and striking back with devastating force. Together, the humans began to turn the tide of the battle. But even with their reinforcements, the humans were still outgunned. The Zokari were relentless, their firepower immense. The battle raged on, and the human fleet was taking heavy losses. Kara's heart sank as she watched one of their ships explode in a fiery burst, its wreckage spinning into the void of space. "We can't hold them off forever," Lieutenant Harris said, his voice grim. "We need a plan, Captain." Kara's mind raced. The Zokari were strong, but they had one weakness: their arrogance. The Zokari believed that they were invincible. They underestimated humanity. They thought that the humans would break under pressure, that they would fall in line like every other species they had conquered. But what they didn't realize was that humans were not like any other species. Humans had something no alien empire could understand: an unbreakable will, a refusal to surrender, and an ability to adapt in the face of impossible odds. "We need to hit them where it hurts," Kara said, her voice cold with determination. "The Zokari think they've already won. We're going to make them think twice." She formulated a plan quickly. The Zokari flagship, a massive warship that commanded the entire fleet, was their primary target. If they could take it down, the rest of the Zokari forces would falter. But the flagship was heavily guarded. It was surrounded by a wall of smaller vessels and protected by advanced shielding that would make it nearly impossible to break through. "We'll need a diversion," Kara said, looking over at Lieutenant Harris. "We'll send in a small team to plant a bomb inside the flagship. It'll be a one-way mission, but it's our only chance." Harris nodded without hesitation. "I'll lead the team." Kara wasn't surprised. Harris was the best officer she had, and he had never backed down from a fight. She watched as he quickly assembled a small group of soldiers, each one a volunteer, each one willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. As the team launched in a small stealth ship, Kara and the rest of the crew on the Defiant prepared for the final push. The Zokari were still pressing hard, but now they were starting to feel the pressure. They didn't know it yet, but their flagship was about to be taken out from within. Minutes later, the bomb was set, and the team was making their way back to their ship. The Zokari flagship was now vulnerable, and Kara could feel the anticipation building. She gave the order. "Fire everything we've got," she commanded. The Defiant unleashed everything in its arsenal. Plasma cannons, missile volleys, and laser blasts rained down on the flagship. The human fleet joined in, giving everything they had. But it wasn't enough. The Zokari flagship withstood the barrage. The humans had to do something more. Then, the signal came through. The bomb had detonated. The flagship erupted in a massive explosion, taking out the heart of the Zokari fleet. Chaos spread as the Zokari ships scrambled, trying to regroup, but it was too late. The human fleet pressed on, launching their final assault. The Zokari were outmatched, and they knew it. In the end. The humans had done what no one had expected. They had defeated the seemingly unstoppable Zokari Empire. It wasn't because they were stronger or better equipped. It was because they refused to give up, no matter how hopeless the situation seemed. As Kara stood on the bridge, watching the last of the Zokari ships retreat into the darkness. She knew one thing: the universe would never again underestimate humanity. The stars shimmered in the distance as Commander Emily Carter looked out from the observation deck of the human ship Ares. The year was 2147, and the galaxy had changed beyond recognition. Humanity had spread across the stars, building colonies and fighting wars, but there was always a shadow that loomed over them. The memory of the alien invasion, a war so brutal it had nearly wiped out the human race, haunted every corner of the galaxy. That invasion had come from the Ithari, a race of technologically advanced beings who, after years of watching humanity grow, had decided to crush them under their heel. The Ithari were ruthless, wiping out human colonies one by one, leaving no survivors. Until one woman, one soldier, stood against them. Emily Carter was not a soldier in the traditional sense. She wasn't part of a powerful fleet, and she didn't lead armies. But Emily had something the Ithari didn't: the power to remember. It all began 3 years ago, when the Ithari's invasion force descended on Earth. The battle was lost almost immediately. The humans had no chance. The Ithari's ships were too powerful, their weapons too advanced. The death toll was staggering. But Emily had been different. Unlike everyone else, she had a special gift, a gift that would change the fate of the entire galaxy. Emily had been a young scientist, working on an experimental neural project. Her team had been developing a new form of data storage, a neural network that could record and store memories directly into a digital format. It was supposed to be a way to preserve knowledge, but when the invasion came, Emily's project became something else entirely. The explosion of the Ithari weapons triggered a surge of energy, altering the neural network in Emily's brain. When she woke up after the attack, everything had changed. She could remember things no one else could. Details of every battle, every strategy, every move the Ithari had made. She could recall every weapon they had used, every weakness they had shown. Emily had become a walking repository of the Ithari's plans and secrets.